Good afternoon. I want to thank Interim Chief Woods, Deputy Chief Becker, Director Pettis for joining us here today. We know that Columbus is not the only city experiencing a spike in violent crime. It remains truly devastating to see this violence in our own streets and across our neighborhoods. Far too often, these tragedies involve youth as both victims and assailants. I've said it before, I will say it again, and I will keep on saying it. Put the guns down. We need every single member of our community to step forward and hold those who commit these crimes accountable for their actions. But we also need families and support systems to stay connected with the youth in their lives, to know where they are at all times, and enforce curfews 24/7, 365. The city and the Division of Police cannot raise children. We need families to do that. This time, the city is not planning to allocate resources to enforce curfews. We need individuals and families to lead the important conversations and to establish and enforce clear, sensible, and common sense expectations within their homes. For its part, the city is making unprecedented investments in programs and resources to keep our youth safe, active, and engaged as we head into the summer months. From violence prevention to sports, employment, and skills training, these opportunities are designed to provide constructive outlets for safe and healthy activities. Columbus Recreation and Parks is offering more camps this year than before the pandemic back in 2019, in addition to late-night basketball, free admission to city pools, and more. In parks, public service, Celebrate One and other city departments are working with community partners to hire hundreds of seasonal positions and offer paid skills-based training for our youth. Earlier this year, we announced the launch and expansion of several anti-violence programs, including Growing Up for young men in Linden, End the Violence, supporting approximately 80 young people, Safe Streets. Our bicycle officers are now patrolling neighborhoods and building relationships during additional hours of the day and months of the year. Reroute, which worked so well in 2 of our zones, we've taken it citywide, while we've doubled the number of interventionists and social workers working with the public health department. And Safe Neighborhoods, based on the work of renowned criminologist David Kennedy. We're also working to evaluate the security within our parks system and identifying options for improvement. We have cameras at Bicentennial Park. Unfortunately, we have learned that they were not working at the time of this incident. We take responsibility for that, and we're fixing that immediately. We also explore other options to ensure that our parks are safe. There's no single answer to the complex problem of violence that cities across America are seeing. We, as a community, must do more and do better to protect our children and keep our neighborhoods safe. It is vital that we all work together to promote a safe and vibrant Columbus and to prevent tragedies like what occurred this past weekend from ever happening again. Now I'd like to invite Interim Chief Woods to say a few words. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank all of you for being here this afternoon. Before I begin any comments, I want to remind all of you that my response to any question will be somewhat limited. Although this is an event of note, it remains an active investigation, an active homicide investigation, and an investigation into the felonious assault of 5 additional victims. At 10:06 p.m. on the 22nd, Columbus Police Radio began receiving phone calls regarding loud noise complaints and loud music complaints at 233 Civic Center Drive, which is Bicentennial Park. We received a total of 9 calls indicating that there was some type of loud disturbance, loud music, and people in that area. At 10:39, we received some additional phone calls. Those phone calls indicated that it was a larger crowd and there was some kind of a disturbance. No information related to any type of violence or assaults going on, but just that a large crowd was in there causing some type of a disturbance. 11 p.m. is the shift change for 16 Precinct, which is the precinct that includes Bicentennial Park and most of downtown. So our first available car to be dispatched to the loud music and the disturbance occurred at 10:48 p.m. At approximately 10:51 is when that first cruiser was arriving. At that same time, the radio room began to receive information about a shooting that occurred at Bicentennial Park. The first cruisers at scene radioed information that there were a lot of kids running around. Again, at 10:51, we received the first call of the shooting, and additional subsequent phone calls reported additional shots being fired in the area. At that point, multiple officers from 16 Precinct and adjoining precincts responded and encountered a lot of people fleeing the scene. When officers arrive at scene on one of these, the first order of business is to try and secure the crime scene to make sure that there's no active threat continuing. The second priority is to then to care for victims. So they began searching for victims and again located 6 individuals that had been shot and 2 individuals that had been injured, we believe through being trampled as the crowd ran. As they were securing those victims, most of our witnesses fled the scene, and we are asking that if anyone has information that was at that park, saw anything, recorded anything on their cell phones, is to provide that information to the Columbus Police. Homicide investigators have been working this diligently since this occurred. We have received some information, we've received some videos, but we know that there were a lot of people there. We know a lot of people have information, and we believe, based upon our experience, that there will be video that was taken at that scene, and we believe that video will help us with this investigation. So it's critically important that if a parent knows their child was there, to have that discussion with them. And if they discover any type of video or any information that they have, please reach out to us and provide us that information. Bicentennial Park remains an active crime scene. We have police cadets assisting our crime scene search unit right now by walking through that park and looking for any evidence that we have not discovered. That will continue for some more time. If that proves successful, we will again increase the number of personnel that are there searching for evidence. It's critically important that we recover any and everything that we can find at that scene. At this time, I'm going to let Chief Becker expand upon some of the investigative measures that are being taken.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor. As Chief Woods said, at 11:51 Saturday, the city experienced our 77th homicide of 2021. In addition, 5 other victims were shot. The detectives I have the honor of working with are actively working this case. One of the females who was shot, who wasn't deceased, the decedent is Olivia Kurtz, a 16-year-old child. One of the adult females who was shot, I had the honor of meeting just a few months ago. We had a situation on February 9th where an Amber Alert was issued for a stolen car, and there was an infant in the back of that car at the time it was stolen. There were sub-zero temperatures that day, and we were frantically searching for about 3 hours till we recovered that car. Police didn't recover that car until 2 young ladies called and told us where that car was. One of the females that was shot the other night was one of the heroes who helped save that baby's life just a few months ago. So it's not often that I get to interact with people that just a few months later are shot, but praying for her recovery. My condolences to all the families involved. As Chief Woods said, we need your help. There was approximately estimates of 100 people plus at the park that night. Very few stayed around to cooperate with detectives. as a parent of a teenager, I'm well aware that teenagers walk around with their phones in their hand, recording constantly. They found out apparently about this party through an Instagram app. They're using their phones to find out about it. They're using them while they're there. As a parent, grandparent, guardian, I encourage you, if you believe your child was there, to be going through their phone, to looking at that if there is evidence, and coming forward to help share that with the police. The homicide detectives can be reached at 614-645-4730. We can also receive tips anonymously or non-anonymously through Central Ohio Crime Stoppers. We're continuing to evaluate the evidence. Hundreds of pieces of evidence have been collected. It'll take a long time to process all that. And as Chief Woods mentioned, we continue to have people out there searching for additional evidence today. Some of the victims that were shot the other night went into surgery and weren't able to, meet with us immediately. So we'll be following up with all the victims. But again, I implore everybody, if you know somebody who may have been out there, encourage them to come forward, share that information so we can take the killer off the street, bring them into the justice system, bring these shooters off the street, get these guns out of the hands of children. All these victims were between the age of 14 and 19. These are all kids. And we have an obligation as adults to look out for these kids. And the way we can do that is get these guns off the street and bring these kids into the system so we can properly deal with this and prevent other people from experiencing these same tragedies. With that, I'd like to introduce the Director of Public Safety, Ned Pettis, Jr.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor, for having me here to speak. I want to close today with a message to our community's parents and grandparents. I was notified of this shooting around midnight Saturday night, early Sunday morning, with very basic details. A short time later, I received an update with some of the ages of the victims. 19 years old, 16 years old, children. This is beyond troubling. It's more than heartbreaking, and it is simply unacceptable. I am a parent and a grandparent. And like many in our community, I have grandchildren who live with me. We all have a responsibility here to see to the well-being and good conduct of our children and our grandchildren. We all need to work together to make our city safer and better. This is a problem so big that it's going to take all of us working together to address it. These are our children and our grandchildren. We want what's best for them and a safe environment for them to live in, to learn in, to grow up and be successful in. This is not a problem that can be solved by government alone. Police cannot be expected to be in all places at all times. Police cannot raise our children. It takes each of us, every family, every household, every block, to take accountability and to do our part. Parents and grandparents, I'm calling on you to step up, not only to account for your children's whereabouts and actions. If it's possible, as the Chief has said, that your children or grandchildren were at this event Saturday, we are asking you to check their phones for any video or photos. This could be the evidence that helps us find those responsible for this horrendous act of violence. We can do better. We must do better. But we must do this together. I urge all of you to do your part. These are our children, and it takes all of us to keep them safe. And it starts at home. Thank you.
I think one point that I want to make sure we reemphasize, and might ask Chief Woods or Deputy Chief Becker to reinforce this. What may seem like a relatively innocent party or get-together amongst adolescents attracts other types of folks as well. And we know, I believe, Chief, that there are at least 2 individuals that have been identified that may have been there that night that have previous violent encounters in our city. And so it's critically important for parents and grandparents to know, even there's a group of teenagers gathering at a park and so forth, because of the way these things have happened, it may very well attract people with dangerous pasts who have malicious intent. Chief, you want to speak any more of that, Deputy Chief Becker?
I think one thing to remember when you have a child or grandchild going to one of these events, you don't know who's going to be there. These are shared by social media apps, through word of mouth, and once it gets out, the group that you thought was going to be there, there may be others that are coming that you don't know. And those others that are coming that you don't know may have some type of a beef with someone that's already there. So you may attend a party and have all the good intentions in the world just getting together with friends. But when you can't control the element and the individuals that are there, bad things can happen, and I believe that's what we saw on Saturday night. An event that could have started off innocent, a group of people getting together to listen to music, quickly deteriorated into gunfire. Again, you don't know who's going to be there, and when bad things happen, you don't want your child or grandchild there, so pay attention to it. Have that conversation with them. Don't wait until an event happens to have the conversation. Talk to them ahead of time. Do you know who's going to be at this party? Should you be at that party? Is somebody going to be there that can control who's coming and going? This is unfortunately not the first event where we've had this situation occur. On campus earlier this year, a party was going on. Individuals that were not initially invited showed up and a homicide occurred. This is not a singular event. We have to do better with this. You have to talk to your kids. Let them know that these things can happen. Control who they're out with. So Insta parties, it's just not a good idea because, number one, being there could be illegal depending upon where it is. If it's on private property, they may not want that party there. This park closed at 11 p.m. After 11 p.m., they're in violation. So these things need to be known by your kids and your grandkids before the party begins.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief, Director, Deputy Chief Becker. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Mayor, and I guess this might be better for the chief and the deputy chief. Why did it take so long for somebody to come to that bottom? Obviously, it was a non-emergency, but just thinking of what else is going on and why that took such a long time.
Chief, Deputy Chief.
So two factors. Number one, are other calls for service. It was a Saturday night on a warm night. So other calls for service were occurring on second shift. Again, at 11 p.m. there is changeover. So you have to have time for the second shift officers to get back to the substation, unload, get their gear out. Third shift has to have roll call, get back in service. And again, I need to look at what other calls were pressing when they marked in service. We prioritize all our calls that we receive, and that's a priority 1 through a priority 5. Priority 1s are our emergency calls. Someone's being hurt, a shooting, a stabbing, all the way down to a priority 5, which is kind of a nuisance, a car that's being parked. Loud music complaints are a priority 4. We do our best to get those dispatched within 60 minutes of receiving that phone call. But in that 60 minutes, if a priority 2 or a priority 3 or priority 1 comes in, that priority 4 is going to get pushed back down. So again, even though it's in there as a priority 4 and received at 10:06, if something more pressing, more urgent comes in, that run will get pushed down. So that is unfortunately how that evolves throughout the night. And that's not an unusual occurrence on a warm Friday, Saturday night in a city of nearly 1 million people. Things occur. So if a domestic comes in, that loud music complaint is going to get pushed down further and further, and with no indication of violence, no indication of someone being in danger, that run is going to keep getting pushed down. So we get it dispatched as soon as we possibly can. So it took more than our 60 minutes. Our goal is 60 minutes, and we meet that whenever we can.
The city is as safe as we choose to make it. Each and every one of us have a responsibility to do our part. And clearly, what happened the other night was avoidable if parents in the community are willing to step up and do their part. we still have an opportunity to bring those to justice who killed a 16-year-old child in our city and harmed others as well. Our city is worth fighting for. And what that means is that we've got to come together, not just investing in youth violence prevention programs and other things that we're doing as a city, but stepping up, looking out for our neighbors, understanding that whether or not these children are ours biologically, they're our responsibility as a community, and making sure that we share information with the police to hold people accountable and get violent assailants off the streets. Our city is as safe as we're willing to fight and work together to make it.
The FOP in a statement over the weekend described what's going on in the city as complete chaos. Is there complete chaos out there?
You know, we're interested in focusing on neighborhood and community safety, making sure our officers have what they need, that our neighborhood and community leaders are working with us to make our neighborhood safe. I'm not going to get into back and forth with folks that may or may not be part of our long-term strategy.
And if I could follow up then quickly, this is a city centerpiece, Bicentennial Park. Are you concerned that there's a perception outside the city that there's chaos, that this is not a safe city? That's a place where you want people to come in from out of town.
Well, I think that's why we're standing here today. And the fact that we lost another 16-year-old child in our city, in our community, and so many young people were clearly in harm's way. And that's why we're asking the community to step up, share information, go through your kids or your grandkids' phones, talk to them about what they saw Saturday night, share that information with law enforcement. They can do it anonymously, as was shared earlier through Crime Stoppers. But we have to hold folks accountable for what happened the other night, but also challenge each other to make sure it doesn't happen again. Dan? Well, clearly, this is going to be a top priority for us, and I'm asking Recreation and Parks to work with the Department of Public Safety to look at all of our cameras at our parks and recreation centers. We know that we have community-based cameras as well, going to ensure that all those are working properly, but it will be my top priority moving forward. As far as how many cameras, Robin, do we know a number? We'll get back to you on the exact number. They will be fixed as quickly as possible. It is a top priority for not just Bicentennial Park, but any other places throughout our city where we have safety cameras, to make sure they're working properly and that we're able to view those. Yes, Kevin. Well, I think what the action you can see is clearly all of the investments and the changes we've made over the last year or so, continuing to expand things that have shown some promise and worked in different parts of the city, citywide, continuing to invest in, having our officers proactively out in community and neighborhoods through our bike patrol program, which we expanded both the amounts and the hours in which they're out there. We're continuing to invest. This unprecedented investment we've made into youth programming and youth services, summer youth employment, all of those things coupled with our work within the Division of Police to tackle some of these issues. So we're going to continue to monitor what's working and expand it and invest in it and stop doing things that aren't working. As far as holding the parents legally responsible, that's something that certainly that we'll have to consider. What I'm asking folks to do is proactively take responsibility for the children in your household and families. And I know that, some kids are living with grandparents. They may be in foster care situations. They may be living with just one parent. I understand the complexity of our households here in Columbus and in cities around the country, but there are adults who need to take responsibility for their young people. The city and the Division of Police cannot raise children. we're going to have to continue to engage them, call them out, hold them accountable in ways, and engage them. Maybe there are additional resources we can bring to bear, or other partners can bring to bear, to support a family who may be facing a particular crisis. But we all need to be working together to deal with these issues.
Mayor, there was a homicide in Bicentennial Park last year. Were you aware, were cameras working at that time, and were you aware if they weren't, and why weren't they fixed before now?
I don't know exactly when the camera stopped working, but I will get you an answer on that. And as far as why they weren't working on Saturday night, I take complete and full responsibility for that, and we'll make sure that they are up and running as quickly as possible.
You're also experiencing, late night basketball, swimming pools free of charge. We've gotten information that the city administration has asked for guard duty, taking patrol officers off duty to be at those places. Is that a concern, taking officers off patrol to be engaged in keeping some of these areas safe?
Well, I think our hope is to put as many officers as possible into proactive community policing engagements with young people and folks at the community and neighborhood level. With respect to the specifics, maybe I could ask Chief Woods if you want to speak to that. I don't think there's in any way, shape, or form we believe that we're putting our officers or the community at risk by doing that. We think this is a great way for us to have some proactive community policing engagements with young people, make sure those venues remain safe, that our young people are safe, and quite honestly, strike up some meaningful relationships with those in law enforcement and potentially expose them to careers in that. Chief Woods?
So one of the avenues we try and explore with that is providing an overtime opportunity for officers to work at city pools or Park and Recs events. If those don't get filled through an overtime, we look at the event, we look at the staffing, and then we make a determination whether or not we should put an officer there that's on duty. That's not every time this happens, there will be an officer there. Those are looked at independently by the zone lieutenant as well as the precinct sergeant. But the first thing that we try and do is through overtime dollars that are provided by Rec and Parks, is to pay officers on their time off to come in and work those. So that's the first way we try to address that. Well, I won't say it sets us back, but it definitely is another piece of evidence that would have provided us information about what was occurring and who was there before the incident occurred. We do have body-worn camera of the officers that are responding. We're going to let the detectives take a look at that and see if there's information that the camera may have picked up on, that an officer's focused on a victim or something else that's occurring, but in the background the body-worn camera may have picked up a piece of evidence that we just haven't had a chance to identify yet. Right now the focus has been on the crime scene. As Chief Becker said, it's a large crime scene. Over 300 pieces of evidence have been recovered thus far, and we are actively searching that right now. So while the surveillance cameras from Rec and Parks would have been beneficial, it's not the only piece of evidence that we have to work off of. We don't have any of that information yet right now. Again, we have two people that stuck around and provided information to detectives, but even as we speak this morning, Homicide was getting additional phone calls from people that were there, people that are providing information of people that they thought were there. So it's kind of a full court press from our Homicide folks. All the four units are working together on this, taking information and gathering information for those lead detectives so they can work backwards and try and find these shooters and arrest them. I mean, it's not just identify them. We want to arrest them and we want to put them in front of a court. And that's the best outcome that from the Division of Police that we can have. The best outcome would have not to have occurred, but it did. So it's our responsibility to conduct that investigation and arrest somebody out of it. Kevin, I didn't hear the first. You know, right now I won't say yes or no because I know we're getting information. We try and use rewards when information starts to dry up or it's not being productive. But as Chief Becker and I discussed before we came over here, Homicide is getting those phone calls. We will be checking back with Crime Stoppers, seeing what information they have. We have ways online you can provide information. So there are a lot of avenues where the public can call in and provide us information. This press conference is another plea to get information. So if that information that we get over the next few days isn't successful, isn't productive, then a reward may be something we look at. But right now, excuse me, right now we're getting that information, so keep it coming. We want to hear it. No, we don't, and that's part of the investigation is looking for shell casings, looking for any bullet fragments. That's why we have that extra eyes over there right now. We've got cadets that are probably going to be getting down on their knees, walking and looking through the grass. It's thick grass right now, springtime, so it's difficult to locate. But we want to try and scour that park all through the grass, all through any piece of concrete or anything out there, trying to find every piece of evidence that we can.
I think the chief makes a great point, and I think Deputy Chief made it earlier today. We are getting information. People are sharing information about what happened the other night. We thank them for that, and we ask people to continue to offer information, details about what they saw, what they heard, what they know about what happened the other night. And again, parents and grandparents to take charge of their young people's phones and look for videos and pictures that could be shared with police, other details to help bring folks to justice and make sure we protect young people moving forward. Well, we think that there are many different challenges with extending the curfew in the midst of a global pandemic. We have lots of issues where we're asking the Division of Police to run point on in the community. And so this is a place where we've got to ask parents and grandparents and family members to step up. The city's not going to impose and enforce a curfew. We need you to do it in your households, in your neighborhoods, to make sure that young people who should not be out in parks or out at all after a certain hour at night are at home where they belong, in the supervision and care of a loving adult. Thanks, everybody.